Ta-da! Hey everyone, this is the face behind KalechippsDev. So nice to meet you all face to face for the first time. So I'm excited to show off the work I've been doing on my next game. After taking a small break after releasing Forest Walk and playing around with a lot of different mechanics and code, I think I've found an idea that has finally stuck. So I'm going to show you the first few steps of progress that I've made on my next project, which is tentatively titled Apothecary. So let's take a look. All right, so here we are in game. So this white box represents the player and the red box represents the enemy. Bear with it for now. I'm not really doing the art. I'm just focused on the game mechanic. So the most central mechanic of Apothecary is going to be this spear. So the player can actually shoot out a spear right now and it'll latch on to the enemy. And then the player can move the enemy around just by moving and being attached with this rope. The enemy can actually move the player around as well, but he's a little bit weaker, so he doesn't move the player quite as much. And if they try to pull against each other, you'll see that the player will win out just ever so slightly. This white versus red rope represents the amount of tension on the rope. So when it's white, there's no tension at all, but as they move apart, the tension becomes greater. I think this will be an interesting game mechanic to fight enemies indirectly rather than directly damaging them. For example, you could have traps that you try to move the enemies into, or maybe try to get the enemies to attack each other instead of you. But I think there's one central issue with the game mechanic as I have it set up, and that's that it's limiting player movement. So I plan for Apothecary to be an action RPG, much in the vein of games like Hades or Hyper Light Drifter. But one central component of these games is that players always have incredible control over exactly how their character is moving. So in Hades, you have to be able to dodge it and dash out of the way really quickly. And much the same thing for Hyper Light Drifter. There needs to be no latency between a player's intention and how their character moves. So I think the spear that I have set up is actually limiting that significantly, because when you spear something, your movement is automatically restricted into the radius of that object. And even though you can pull it around, it's hard because you're slowed down. I mean, think about these games and how debilitating a slowing effect is. Now, making that slowing effect a central and necessary part of the actual game, maybe not so fun for players. Luckily, as you can see from the scuffed art that I have set up right now, I'm still in the prototyping stage, which means I can shuffle things around and find what really makes things fun for the player. So that's what I'm going to be spending today doing, trying to refactor this spear and maybe find a way to make it work without limiting player movement. So I'm going to be testing some ideas out and I'll take you along for the ride. Okay, so after a couple hours, here's what I came up with. So the player can still move around and there's a short dash action now. But the most interesting thing is the enemies can now take damage from being attacked by spears. And then when you retract the spears, they also do damage. So right now, these enemies can take about 10 hits. So if I shoot 5 spears out and then retract them all through the enemy, it dies. You can even throw some spears on this guy and then retract them over here, which does damage that way. I think it's pretty fun with the dash included. Now, ultimately, this mechanic is something I'm really proud of, and I think it fits the sort of fast-paced, action-oriented game I'm trying to make Apothecary into. Ultimately, the original spear mechanic was fun, but I think it more fits something slow-paced like a puzzle game, where you have time to think and the player movements don't need to be quite so precise. I think this is really something important about the prototyping stage of a project early like this. Don't really get caught up in the art or making something super polished, just get the core mechanic out there so you can see if it's fun in practice. So the original spear mechanic, even though I thought it was cool in my head, in practice I found it probably wouldn't be very fun for the player. And then I made this mechanic in just a couple hours and found out that it's something I really jive with. So definitely if you're prototyping, keep things light. And that's what I did here. So now I can move forward with this prototype and try to add some items. I think those could interact with the spear in interesting ways as well. So I'll hit you up when I work on that. I've just got a couple hours left in the day, so we'll see where we can get. All right, we're back. It's Wednesday morning now. I ended up not recording anymore last night and just had some heads down time with the code, but I was able to get the items working, so let's show off the work I did with that now. All right, so we're in game now. You can still walk around as normal, but now when you defeat an enemy, a little item pops out. That actually popped out right towards me and I picked it up immediately. But the interesting thing is it actually interacts with the spear as well. So if I spear an item, it'll get picked up by the spear and then it can pull it back to me. So now there's 2 layers of interaction. You both have the sort of spearing of attacking enemies, and you can also pick up items and toss them back to you. All right, I think I'm just gonna get a little more work done this morning before I wrap up for this video, maybe add some visual effects. But before that, let's get some coffee. Except I don't really drink coffee, so you can watch some creative cinematography of me mixing some creatine, I guess. And that'll be our coffee. All right, and we're back with some neat visual effects. So obviously these are just placeholders for now, but I think it helps breathe some life into the game and really make it feel like a game by having some art. So everything still works the same, but now we've got this little samurai guy and some cyclopes. So I can't take credit for this art. It actually came from an asset pack on itch.io. Credits to the artist Pixel Boy for making these. I'll link his stuff in the description. But it serves as a nice placeholder for the time being. So hopefully you enjoyed this behind the scenes look of how the prototyping stage of a game looks early in a game's development. Obviously, things are still loose and could move around, but I'm really enamored with this spear mechanic for now, and it's something I'm going to be moving forward with. Now, the next stages of the project probably include adding some enemies to see if this mechanic holds water in an actual combat environment, so I'll be coding up some basic level generation and some enemies for the next devlog, but stay tuned for that. For now, this project is going to be called APOTHECARY. I still have some ideas floating around, but I kind of want this game to be based around plants and foraging, sort of like an apothecary does, with some aspects of healing in the natural environment. Nothing's concrete yet, but at least those are the ideas I have floating around. I move into college next week, so hopefully I'll be able to talk to y'all in a week or so when things are settled there and I get some more work done on the game. But stay tuned for some new enemies and see how it works with the spear mechanic in the next devlog. Until then, take care, y'all. Oh, and leave a comment letting me know what you think of the new format. This new vlog style of devlog is something I'm probably going to be trying, and especially as I go into college, there might be some interesting stuff to show. So if you're interested in seeing that, let me know. I'm really hoping y'all will like it. Okay, take care, y'all.